Imagine dark labyrinths, deep, deep underground. They're full of hidden dangers and unexpected discoveries. Get your flashlight, and let me take you on a tour of the spookiest caves of all time. And the first destination on our list is Cathedral Caverns in Alabama. Originally, this place was called Bat Cave, but it was later renamed because of what it looks like. As you approach it, you can't help but notice its huge entrance, measuring 126 feet wide and 25 feet high. But this grand entrance is just the beginning. Inside the cave, there are some of the most beautiful formations nature has ever created. One of the most famous of them is probably Goliath, a giant 45 feet tall stalagmite with a circumference of 243 feet. Other amazing sights you might want to visit include a caveman balancing on top of a flowstone wall, a frozen waterfall, and a forest of tall stalagmites. You're probably curious, how did such an exciting place make it onto the list of the scariest caves out there? The thing is, the sheer size of the cave is still unknown, and only about 2 miles of it are mapped and open to the public. But the cave can and does show its dangerous side from time to time. For example, the directors of the 1984 sci-fi movie What Waits Below filmed a lot of scenes in Cathedral Caverns. But during the shooting, 17 cast and crew members got carbon monoxide poisoning and had to be immediately taken to a hospital, barely avoiding serious consequences. But let's move further to Moaning Cavern in California. What makes it particularly creepy is the bizarre breathing sound. It's produced by water dripping through bottle-like openings at the base of the cave. If a person who's unaware of the nature of this breathing comes close, this ominous respiration might cause them to steer clear of the place. On the other hand, these moaning sounds might have evoked curiosity in some adventurous souls, and usually it didn't end well. Researchers have found the remains of more than 100 prehistoric people who fell down the cave's 410-foot chasm around 13,000 years ago. These days, you can go on a tour around the cave, but no deeper than 165 feet into the vertical opening. If you're feeling particularly bold, you can rappel down. But you'll still have to exit using a Gothic-looking wrought iron staircase. Be careful not to slip. It's a long way down. The next cave we'll visit is ominously called Hellhole. You can find it in West Virginia. It's notorious enough to inspire a few horror movies. Despite its name, the place is chilly, but no less creepy for this discrepancy. The average temperature inside the cave is 47 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it the perfect home for a large variety of bats and other rare cave-dwelling inhabitants. In fact, in the winter, the cave accommodates about half of the world's population of Virginia big-eared bats. These are critically endangered and highly vulnerable creatures. But it won't stop a chill from running down your spine once you see a cloud of 20,000 squeaking, wing-fluttering bats. Bell Witch Cave is a relatively small formation located in Tennessee. And despite its innocent appearance, it serves as the focal point for an equally fantastic and terrifying story. According to the legend, in the early part of the 19th century, the farmer and his family suffered from the mischief of a ghost. It made a lot of noise at night, ripped sheets from beds, and even physically attacked the farmer and some of his family members. Eventually, the farmer passed away, and a vial with unknown black liquid was found next to him. Some people believed that the ghost had somehow poisoned him. Soon after that, the spirit left the farmer's family alone. Locals were sure the ghost had returned to a cave near the farm. They also believed the mystical creature promised to return when the time was right. Even today, local inhabitants report strange occurrences happening around the cave. They swear they are linked to the ghost once taunting the farmer's family. I bet that no matter how skeptical you are, the cave will make your skin crawl. And this is Wind Cave in South Dakota. At first glance, it might seem that there's nothing super scary about this cavern. No roiling mass of bats, no ancient remains or toxic gases. But the cave is home to a blood-chilling and very rare geological feature. Nowhere else in the world will you find a more extensive network of boxwork calcite. How did Wind Cave create the perfect conditions for the boxwork remains? It's still a mystery, but what you do notice is that this boxwork resembles a massive spider web a bit too much for comfort. Even though it's just a geological anomaly, it's hard to look at the boxwork and not imagine tons of cave spiders skittering along those thin strands of hardened minerals. Now, let me take you to a place that seems to be out of this world. There's nothing mysterious or dangerous about this place, but it's kinda unique. Life inside this cave has been isolated from the outside world for about 5.5 million years. And it does show. See for yourself. Because of such long isolation, the conditions inside Mobile Cave are like nowhere else in the world. Despite a severe lack of sunlight inside the cave and the toxicity of the air, a unique ecosystem is flourishing there. The cave is located a few miles west of the Black Sea in Romania, and it was first found in 1986. These days, you can only visit it if you have special permission. But even if you have it, the central caverns are guarded naturally by super narrow limestone tunnels and vertical shafts. So, those who are familiar with claustrophobia shouldn't enter this place. In the depth of the cave, the air has twice less oxygen than the air outside. It contains a lot of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, which means it's not the freshest air you can breathe. It's also pitch black inside the cavern. But despite, or should I say, thanks to, this cocktail of extremely harsh conditions, the site is a true goldmine for biologists. Life seems to be booming here. In a 1996 study, scientists identified 48 species living there. 33 of them are unique to the cave. Most of the creatures inhabiting the cave are tiny. They have long limbs and antennae, helping them navigate in the dark. They also have no vision and lack pigment, which makes sense. Why would you need to be able to see if you live in total darkness? And why would you need to be pretty and colorful with no one to see you? Now, get ready to explore one more cave. No less amazing, but very different. This is the Giant Crystal Caves, aka Cave of the Crystals, in Mexico. These massive crystals were found in 2000 by a mining company after the water was pumped out of the cave. 2 miners then entered the drying cave on foot and saw the crystals. These awe-inspiring crystals are actually massive gypsum pillars hidden 984 feet underground. Scientists estimate that the crystals could have been already growing for 500,000 years. That's why many of them are so long and wide that you can walk across them. Unfortunately, visiting this wonder of nature is impossible at the moment. But maybe it's for the better, since Giant Crystal Cave is a dangerous place that can easily turn into a trap. For tens of thousands of years, it was filled with groundwater, which was originally pushed upward into the opening by a magma chamber located in the depths of our planet. The magma under the cave kept the water hot, but eventually, the temperature of the water dipped below 136 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the water started to fill with calcium and sulfate, whose particles began to recombine into gypsum, and then white-tinted crystals took over the cave. And since they stayed underwater, they were able to keep growing.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
There's a heavy snowstorm. The cold penetrates his bones. His legs are almost knee-deep in snow. experienced hunter Joe LaBelle makes his way through the forest, covering his face from the headwind. Any other person would have already fallen and screamed in despair, but not Joe LaBelle. He can survive in any circumstances and always knows what to do. Right now, he's heading to one of the villages in the far north of Canada. This small settlement is located on Lake Anjikuni. The inhabitants of this village are Inuit, indigenous people of North America. Joe hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time. He needs a good sleep and a hot meal, which he hopes to get from the hospitable Inuits. Through trees and a white haze, he notices the silhouettes of tents. Smoke is coming from some houses. Joe will probably get there in time for lunch. He reaches the village, and at this moment, the wind calms down. The blizzard has ended. The hunter speeds up and goes toward the village, located along the frozen lake. It's strange, but there are no locals anywhere. Probably everyone is just sitting in their houses, waiting out the blizzard. "Hello!" Joe says loudly, but gets no response. Oh, great! Smoke is coming out of this tent. Joe knocks on the wall, but no one opens it. He knocks a few more times and goes inside. The little tent is empty. All things are in their places. There's a piece of cloth with needles and thread on the table. Firewood is smoldering in the fireplace. It seems that people have just left this place. Joe goes into the next tent and sees the same picture. All things are in their places, but there are no people. Joe walks past the tents and sees a pit where a bonfire once burned. There's a rope above it with the meat that the Inuit were cooking hanging on it. For some reason, they didn't eat it. Lake Anjikuni is part of a chain of waterways. Here, the Inuits fished and traded various goods. Usually, there are many people here, but now something has forced them to leave their homes. Why did they leave their things behind? And where did they go? There are no tracks around the village. All the sleds are in place. The Inuits have even left their dogs here, and dogs help them to hunt and ride sleighs. No one will leave warm clothes and dogs here when moving away, especially in severe weather. Joe LaBelle knows all this, so he concludes that something terrible has happened here. His body is shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. After going around the entire settlement, he finds not a single soul. Terrified, he leaves the village, heads for the nearest telegraph pole, and sends a message to the police. After a while, more and more people arrive. The police are trying to find traces of missing people and figure out what has happened, but there's nothing. Near the village, they find an empty grave. During the ceremony, the Inuits placed stones around the burial site. The rocks around the open pit lie untouched, which means it wasn't an animal that dug it up, but who or what needed it? About 30 people lived in the village, and they're all gone. Local residents from neighboring villages can't help, since they have no idea what has happened. The only thing that the police have noticed is unusual blue lights. In this area, the northern lights are a common phenomenon. People living here regularly see a glow in the starry sky. But the police have seen something else, pulsing blue lights. Also, other hunters have witnessed something similar. They say that some strange things were flying in the sky. This all happened in 1930. It's been almost 90 years since the disappearance of the village, and people have created a bunch of theories. The most popular of them is an attack of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the blue lights in the sky that the locals and the police saw were spaceships. Some believe that one ominous night, these ships flew to the settlement and took away all the people. In addition to these sci-fi versions, there were also more realistic ones. Internet users have found out that Joe LaBelle didn't have a hunting license. Maybe he wasn't a professional and made it all up. But at that time, many hunters didn't have a license, so Joe's words may be true. But if we try to find out where all this information came from, we'll see that the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s. But none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjakuni is true. Perhaps this entire story was made up. Now let's leave the snows of Canada and head for the hot plains of India. In this big country, there's one sinister village where people also disappeared without a trace. This happened in the first half of the 19th century. Still, locals avoid this place even now because they believe that invisible evil forces live there. Let's check and find out what happened to the village of Kuldara. It's located in the district of Rajasthan. To get there, you can use a taxi to get to the nearest village or city. The village is located far from other settlements. It looks deserted. There are only ruins. It looks like archaeologists have recently dug this place out of the ground and left it here. But this is not an ancient city. The village was abandoned more than 200 years ago. But up to that point, this place had been thriving. Kuldara was a large village. Local people were mostly farmers. They sold their agricultural products. And then, one night, everything changed. People abandoned their homes and stuff and ran away from there. No one knows why they did it, and no one knows where they went. Nobody has ever seen the inhabitants of Kuldara again. Apart from tourists, almost no one comes here. The locals are sure that the village is cursed and is the center of paranormal activity. If you ask residents of other nearby towns, or read the information on the internet, you'll learn a couple of legends about this place. One popular version says that people left this village because of a lack of water. However, this version doesn't explain why the residents did it overnight and left their things behind. According to another version, the villagers ran away to save the daughter of the Kuldara chief. One local ruler fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. He threatened the locals with grave consequences if the girl rejected him. The ruler gave them 1 day to make a decision. The residents disagreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village together with the chief and his daughter. But if this is true, why did no one else see these people? They must have escaped to another settlement. In addition, they needed their things on the way there. The stories of Kuldara and Lake Anjakuni have one thing in common. People left a comfortable and safe place for an unknown reason. A similar story happened in Ireland with a small village on the island of Achill. About 40 simple houses made of stone and straw were located along the valley of Keem Bay. The village was mentioned in documents dated back to the 1830s as a group of small buildings. But today, there's practically nothing left of it, except pieces of walls and small mounds of ground. People from other settlements don't remember this village, but we know about it thanks to the records of travel writers. They describe the incredible beauty of this place and the village in their diaries. Students of the local archaeological school tried to find the answers. They started excavations and discovered that the villagers could have left the village because of hunger or some disease.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
The theory of parallel worlds has been discussed in the scientific community for a very long time. Unfortunately, we're not developed enough yet to prove or disprove it. But it's still an interesting theory, and that's why we have a lot of unusual urban legends about the guests from a parallel reality, according to many. Let's check out a few of them. A man from a non-existent country. This story took place in 1851 in a small German village, Frankfurt an der Oder. A lost man came out to the local villagers asking for help. The man introduced himself as Jopar Voren. He spoke very poor German and had a very strong accent. The man himself claimed that he speaks Laxar and Abram, languages that don't actually exist on our Earth. He claimed to be from Laxaria, a country on the mainland called Sacria, separated from Europe by a huge ocean. However, none of these places existed on the Earth's map. People sent Yopar to the local authorities. He talked to a psychiatrist, but the doctor concluded that the man was totally sane. An investigation by the local police also revealed nothing suspicious about him. Yopar Vorin claimed that the purpose of his visit to Europe was to find his long-lost brother. He survived a shipwreck and found himself near the village. They showed him a map of the world and a globe and asked him to indicate the place where he crashed, but he didn't recognize anything familiar. He seemed to have extensive knowledge about his homeworld. Yopar named 5 main continents on it: Sacria, Aflar, Ostar, Auslar, and Uplar. His story was considered plausible. Scientists from Frankfurt decided to send the man to Berlin for further research. However, during the trip, he had something like a seizure. The man suddenly jumped out of the carriage and disappeared into the surrounding forest. Despite a long and thorough search, no traces of Yopar were found. He seemed to have disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared. Inspector Leboeuf, who was assigned to escort him to Berlin, thought this man could be a being from another world, and that he had returned from where he had come from. Lady on Highway 167. This incident happened on October 20th, 1969. It was first reported in 1988 in the magazine Strange. The article tells about 2 men, LC and his business partner, Charlie. The names are fictitious. One afternoon, LC and Charlie were driving along Highway 167 in southwest Louisiana. Discussing work, they drove toward the oil center of Lafayette. The highway was empty at first, but then the men noticed a very old and very slow car ahead. The men started discussing this mysterious car. Such cars hadn't been produced for several decades, but this one looked quite new. The men thought it was thanks to the owner's care and admired it. They slowed down to get a better look at the car. LC noticed a bright orange sign on it that said 1940. They saw a driver. It was a young woman in old-fashioned clothes, a hat with a long feather and a fur coat, even though it was warm outside. There was a child next to her, also dressed in a warm coat and a hat. LC and Charlie wanted to talk to her, but then they noticed the expression on her face. The woman was looking around in panic, almost on the verge of crying. LC called out to her and asked if she needed help. She nodded, and he gestured for her to park on the side of the road. But when the men also parked, they suddenly noticed that the woman's car had disappeared. They looked around the highway in shock. She couldn't have gone somewhere far so fast, but the car was nowhere to be found. After some time, another man drove up to LC and Charlie. He saw everything that happened and claimed that the car had simply disappeared. The men talked about the incident for several hours. When they reached the city, they contacted the police. However, the police couldn't help them in any way. Apart from their words, there was no confirmation of the existence of the car. The case was discussed for a while in local newspapers, and then was forgotten. The Gadianton Canyon Incident. This incident occurred in May of 1972 in southeastern Utah near the Modena Railroad crossing on the edge of the Escalante Desert. Jenna North was driving her father's 1971 Chevrolet Nova. Her friend, Carol Abbott, was in the passenger seat. In the back seat, there were 2 other girls, Lisa Rockford and Bethany Gordon. It was after 10 p.m. when the girls crossed the Utah-Nevada state line. They wanted to get back to campus before their housekeeper, Mrs. Mortensen, locked the dorm doors. This stretch of Highway 56 in Utah is pretty deserted. There's nothing there but sand and a few plants. The girls were very happy when they finally noticed the Union Pacific Railroad crossing in Modena. But right behind the railing, Jenna noticed 2 highways. One went into the desert, and the other to Gadianton Canyon. The girls decided to take the road to the canyon. They thought it would be a shortcut to campus. The other girls were chatting with each other when Jenna noticed that they were no longer driving on asphalt, but on white cement. "Watch out!" suddenly shouted one of the girls. The road ended abruptly at a high rock wall. It was a dead end. They had to go back the same way they came here. And while Jenna's friends were complaining that now they would have to sleep in the car, Jenna saw that the landscape had changed dramatically. They weren't in the desert anymore. Instead, the canyon turned into an open area with wheat fields, pine thickets, and a small lake ahead. A full moon was shining in the sky, which was strange because it shouldn't have been there that night. The girls had no idea where they were, so they just drove to the light ahead. It was some building that they thought was a diner or restaurant. The girls saw a bright neon sign, but none of them could read what was written on it. These symbols were unlike any language they knew. Suddenly, several people came out of the building. They seemed shocked and frightened by Jenna's Chevrolet. They waved their hands and shouted something, but the girls didn't understand them. Lisa decided to ask the men for directions. She stuck her head out of the window and immediately let out a terrifying scream. "Get out of here!" she shouted to Jenna. The Chevrolet sped away from the building. Bright headlights illuminated their car from behind. They were being chased by a few vehicles. These vehicles were egg-shaped, had 3 wheels, and made a buzzing sound. The road ahead led back to the canyon. Jenna didn't have time to slow down and crashed right into it. The vehicles had disappeared, together with an unfamiliar landscape. The girls were back in the desert again. Fortunately, none of them were hurt, physically. But Lisa was in a state of shock. She was saying again and again, "They weren't human!" The girls had to help her walk. An hour later, they were able to stop a Utah Highway Patrol car. They told the police their story. The details of the report compiled by the police officer were complicated and confusing. During the investigation, the police couldn't figure out from the tire tracks exactly where the car went astray. The tracks ended very abruptly, as if the Chevrolet had suddenly disappeared. The police couldn't explain how the car could have driven 2 miles without leaving any traces, especially on such solid ground. There are still disputes about this story, but in the end, all versions and explanations of what happened are just guesses. Perhaps we'll never find out the truth. These were the urban legends about interdimensional traveling. Of course, there's no proof that any of these stories are real. Often the truth turns out to be very mundane. For example, the famous man from Taured, who people also called a guest from another reality, turned out to be a simple fraudster named John Allen Kuchar Zegras. But even so, these stories are still very interesting.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. You know, there are many doors all around the world that have no keys. Maybe you can guess how to open them. The first destination is, okay, read this, and good luck to you. It's a temple in India. The temple's name comes from this other really long word, which can be translated as the one emerging from the lotus. This temple is one of India's most popular and sacred places. It's one of 108 temples of this word. It dates way back. It was mentioned in Tamil literature in the 6th century. Flash forward to our time. In 2011, the Indian Supreme Court decided to document the valuables of the temple because they had been informed that the place might have been misused. To do so, they had to open the doors that had been closed for centuries. The committee went to the temple and discovered 6 huge secret vaults that held unbelievable treasures. After the chamber doors opened, they found at least $22 billion worth of golden idols, necklaces, and coins. The officials also discovered ceremonial costumes and gold coconut shells with jewels. Plus, they saw large diamonds. Not our understanding of large, though. Some of these precious stones were as large as 110 carats. To put it in perspective, a small solid gold statue from the collection could be worth around $30 million. After this fairy tale-ish treasure had been discovered, the temple got equipped with metal detectors, cameras, and other safety precautions before the first visitors started to arrive. Now, there are a lot of security guards at the temple. But are they protecting the treasure, or is there something more mysterious hiding behind its doors? The temple has 6 chambers, and the valuables are kept there. These rooms are named Chambers A through F. The expedition committee opened 5 of these vaults with significant effort. But the most bizarre thing is that, despite all the efforts involving existing tech, the mysterious Chamber B still wouldn't open. On the side of the door, 2 carved cobras are welcoming you. The door works as a gate. You can easily see it with the unaided eye, just like the doors leading to other chambers. Surprise! Experts discovered 2 more doors behind the first one. The second door is wooden, and the last one is made of iron. Strangely, the last door was sealed. It also doesn't have any means of entry, no bolts, handles, latches, or anything else. To this day, no one knows what's inside Chamber B. Believers say that opening the door against its will can release into the world unnameable things. Others say that Chamber B may hide a tunnel. It might not be related to the reasons above, but the High Court of India warned against opening the doors of Chamber B. Now, in 2010, David Crespi, a French engineer, visited Machu Picchu. He discovered a strange door in one of the main buildings. The door was in a narrow path neither tourists nor archaeologists used very often. David believed that the place was an entrance the Incas had sealed for some reason. He contacted archaeologists and authorities right away. They promised him to start investigating the area in the near future and let him know about his potential discovery. Well, months passed, but he didn't get any news. No response to his emails and calls. In 2011, he found an article by Terry Jameen about Peru. David reached out to him in no time. He described his finding to Jameen. After that, Jameen and other archaeologists went to Machu Picchu to investigate the secret door. They concluded that this door was indeed an entrance sealed by the Incas. The researchers confirmed the existence of 2 entrances found behind the famous door. They also got the 3D representation of a staircase leading to the main room and another chamber. The analysis also revealed several cavities, among which there was a vast quadrangular room. Plus, georadars detected some metals. Those might be golden and silver objects. Jameen and his team thought this place was a chamber of pre-Hispanic times. They believed the door had been sealed by the Incas to hide something important. Maybe an enormous treasure, or something no less precious. Jameen also claimed that finding this chamber could lead to the discovery of a mausoleum. Jameen submitted an official request to the Peruvian authorities for permission to open the chambers. Yet, neither his application nor requests of other archaeologists have been approved so far. Authorities claim that opening this door could cause damage on the other sides of the archaeological site. Yet, the use of an endoscopic camera has confirmed the hypothesis that the stone blocks at the entrance are only there to close the passage. They are not there to support the internal structures of the building. The third mystery is in Giza, Egypt. Explorers uncovered 2 secret doors inside the Great Pyramid. There are 2 tunnels, each around 8 inches wide, that go from the north and south walls of the Queen's Chamber. But the tunnels are closed by stone blocks before they reach the outside of the pyramid. So, where are they leading to? No one really knows the true purpose of these tunnels. Some archaeologists think these doors might be hiding a yet undiscovered chamber. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass explained how these doors were first found. A robot designed for this expedition was sent inside the shafts of the Queen's Chamber to find out what was there. The research team attached a camera to the robot. The footage revealed that behind the stone door, there was another sealed door. The archaeologists were thrilled to see this door instead of just a dead end. The structure of the stone door blocks the other doors perfectly. Experts think it's an incredible bit of engineering. Now, it's not possible to reach the door because it's behind a huge stone block. But archaeologists are trying to find a way to get there without damaging other parts of the structure. These new discoveries have only raised more questions instead of answering the already existing ones. Secrets are still waiting to be revealed. Our final stop is the Taj Mahal, a monument to love. Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan made this memorial to honor the memory of his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. The total number of doors in the Taj Mahal is so great, this video would be days long if we started talking about all the sealed rooms. Experts think that if someone opened these doors after they've been closed for so long, it'd release carbon monoxide. And when this gas meets the marble, it forms calcium carbonate. That's why this could lead to the appearance of cracks in the minarets of the Taj Mahal. Also, a legend says that if these doors get open, a dreadful curse will be unleashed from the mausoleum's underground chambers. And here's a bonus from Canada: the door of room 873. This is a room at the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, which opened in 1888. The story goes like this. Decades ago, someone committed a crime in this room. After the investigation, the hotel administration refurbished the room and rented it out to other travelers. But rumor has it, other guests who stayed in the room later also faced unpleasant situations. They reported hearing strange noises. The TV in the room kept flickering. It's guessed that the door of room 873 was sealed with bricks. Curious guests who heard these mysterious stories wander along the corridor where the room used to be and knock on the walls to contact potential ghosts. Well, which of these secret doors would you like to open? That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
They used to call this island the Paris of the East, mostly because it had beautiful buildings with large gardens and impressive stone archways. But now, it's nothing like it used to be, with all the architecture almost entirely covered in tree roots and vines. Ross Island is a small territory in the Indian Ocean. It's located east of the Indian city of Port Blair. Though initially thought of as a jail, Ross Island eventually became a luxurious resort for the local administrators. They called this island a real treat for its more privileged residents. It boasted opulent bungalows, stained glass window panels brought all the way from Italy, neatly kept gardens, tennis courts, and even swimming pools. Soon after the complex was closed in 1937, a powerful earthquake hit the island. It caused a lot of damage, making it even more uninhabitable. The island is now in the administration of India and has become a tourist attraction for people interested in abandoned towns. Pieces of German architecture still lie hidden in the Namibian desert. The city of Kolmanskop, Namibia, was a luxury location at its peak in the early 1900s when German workers settled here looking for diamonds. This abandoned town used to have everything from a ballroom to a hospital and even a bowling alley. It all started to decline somewhere in the late 1910s when another diamond-packed location was found nearby. So, most of the people living here moved, leaving everything behind in search of more money. Kolmanskop has since been slowly occupied by sand dunes, while the hot temperature and low moisture help to preserve the buildings. This ghost town is also available for visitors. If it sounds interesting, you can book a tour in the nearby town of Lüderitz. Another abandoned castle dominates the view in Krakow, a city in Italy. The whole village sits atop a cliff that's 1,312 feet high. The founders liked this location since they knew it would be easy to defend themselves from unwanted guests. But the castle, built in the 1300s, soon became overwhelmed by landslides and earthquakes. Even though it has no residents anymore, the medieval city often comes alive during the various local festivals that take place here in the summer months. The locals also offer tours and tell amazing stories about the location. One of the highlights of the tour is a statue that seemingly came out of nowhere and now lies in a body of water. Hidden away in the Montana mountains, Garnet Ghost Town tells the well-known American story of the West's gold rush. The town's history goes back to the 1890s, when they found a lot of gold in the Nancy Hanks mine. During its glory days, Garnet had almost 1,000 residents. Even though it's in a relatively secluded location, it had saloons, hotels, stores, a school, and other features of a regular little town. In 1905, when most of the gold had already been taken away, most mines were left behind. so only a couple of hundred residents stayed in Garnet. The final straw came in 1912, when a fire damaged most of the town's buildings. So, by the 1940s, Garnet was completely abandoned. It soon became a hotspot for treasure hunters looking for furnishings and artifacts. That was until a preservation campaign started in the 1970s. It ended with the town being declared a historic district in 2010. To this day, Garnet is one of the best preserved ghost towns in the area. Hashima Island is another abandoned location that tells us that when people leave, nature takes over. This mysterious place was even featured in a James Bond movie because of its ghostly landscape. It used to be a well-known spot in Japan for undersea coal mines, as it was opened in 1881. In 1959, at its peak, there were over 5,000 people living here, including mine workers and their families. As soon as the mines started going dry, sometime in 1970, people started to slowly depart the island, leaving it completely abandoned in 3 months. Even though nobody lives there these days, there are a lot of tourists here that drop off to wander around the abandoned homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. Another town that started with a mining company back in 1881 is Calico, California. People discovered the location was packed with silver, so it soon became home to over 500 silver mines and 3,000 residents. It used to feature hotels, general stores, restaurants, and a school. There was even a local newspaper printed here called the Calico Print. But by 1986, the town had become empty. One of the former locals decided to buy it and began its restoration, making it a registered historical landmark. It even has a museum of the Old West available for tourists. One of the most interesting attractions that were rebuilt is the 1-mile-long Calico and Odessa Railroad. It currently goes through the steep canyons and hills, and even passes the old mines and buildings north of Calico. Approximately 1/3 of the town is original, while the rest consists of newer buildings that are replicas meant to recreate the spirit of its past. If you're a fan of cars, you might have heard of Henry Ford as the famous American industrialist who founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. But in 1927, he began working on another one of his ambitious dreams, Fordlandia. It was supposed to be a massive rubber plantation located near the Tapajos River in Brazil, since he needed a reliable source of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His vision was to design a town complete with swimming pools, a golf course, living bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions for the locals. This project was unfortunate to begin with, since the local rubber trees soon got infected with leaf fungus. Even though Henry Ford invested a staggering $20 million into this potential income source, the town failed to produce the needed rubber. He had nothing left to do but to sell it to Brazil in 1945, and soon it was completely abandoned. Many of its buildings are still standing, but have been taken over by the surrounding nature. You can still see curious tourists wandering through it to this day. During its glory days, Hampi was the second largest city in the world. Looking at its ruins today, it's hard to imagine this Indian city used to be filled with temples and bazaars, and that it served as an important center of the Mauryan Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was destroyed in the 16th century, but it still has beautifully preserved forts and markets. It became part of the UNESCO World Heritage in 1986, aiming to protect its buildings, such as the Lotus Mahal, a stone structure that was carved to resemble a lotus flower opening to the sun. A tourist village was constructed back in 1920 along the shore of Epicuén, a salt lake about 370 miles southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was designed to provide people with a busy city life a breath of fresh air near the restorative salt waters of the nearby lake. It was soon equipped with a railroad station and ended up having a population of more than 5,000 residents. The project was also destined to fail soon enough, as the unusual amount of rain at that time caused Lake Epicuén to swell. In 1985, the water took over the local dam, and the town was flooded. The waters were so deep that they even reached a depth of 33 feet in 1993. They only began to recede in 2009 and left behind the remaining buildings, literally encrusted in salt. No one came back to the town except for Pablo Novak, who returned here back in 2012 and was the only resident of Villa Epicuan at the time.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
How do you imagine it is to work as a lighthouse keeper? Probably like an introvert's dream. You're alone on a rock in the middle of the sea with nothing but the raging waves and the light to keep you company. But being alone can have its downside too. No one will know if something happens to you. And that was exactly the case with the keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. It was a fine and calm day on December 15th, 1900. In such weather conditions, lighthouses aren't crucial for the safety of passing ships, but it was still noted as a bit odd by the Arctur, a steamer passing by the Flannan Isles on its way to Philadelphia, that the lighthouse on Eilean Mor was not operational. The ship's captain noted it in his log and left it at that. It was only 3 days later, when the Arctur arrived to the port of Leith, that this strangeness was officially reported. A ship was immediately rigged with a relief lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore, to be delivered to Eilean Mor. But the weather had been bad since the day before, and it couldn't set sail for more than a week. Finally, on December 26th, the relief boat Hesperus arrived at the lighthouse. But even as they approached, they could tell it's not been maintained this whole time. The lighthouse had normally been manned by 3 people, James Ducat and Thomas Marshall, the regular keepers, and Donald MacArthur, the occasional who has been substituting for another keeper on sick leave. There was a 4th too, a rotating man who was on store at the time. The Hesperus crew, however, was met by no one. Normally, at least one of them would have been waiting for the ship on the dock. That was the first sign of trouble, but by far not the last. Upon arrival, James Harvey, captain of the ship, also noticed that there was no signal flag on the flagstaff to welcome the relief boat, and all the supply crates had been left on the landing while they should have been inside. Harvey blew the ship's whistle. No reaction. A flare was fired in the air. No effect either. The sense of unease grew on the Hesperus, so Moore decided to deploy a boat and go on shore alone to investigate. It was ominously quiet on the island. The lighthouse stood dark and lifeless, only seagulls keeping it company. Moore went on to explore the territory and the building itself, and what he found unsettled him even further. There was no sign of the keepers, not even a trace left. Both the main gate and the entrance door to the lighthouse were closed. The beds were unmade, and most eerily, the clocks stopped. That meant the men were absent for more than a week. Pensive and alarmed, Moore returned to the ship and took 3 volunteers back to shore to further investigate. Inside the lighthouse, they saw other signs the keepers left in a hurry. There was an overturned chair near the dinner table, and 2 of the 3 protective oilskin coats were missing. The 3rd was still on the hook, which was very strange. The weather during the past week was terrible, so why would one of the men leave the building without protection? And in any case, the rules dictated that there should always be at least 1 keeper on the post tending to the lighthouse. For all 3 of them to leave at once, something terrible must have happened. When the men returned to the Hesperus, Captain Harvey used a telegraph to send a note to the Northern Lighthouse Board. It said that a dreadful accident had happened at the Flannans and that all the keepers had disappeared. His guess was that the poor souls had been swept away by the raging sea or had fallen from a cliff. Harvey's requested an official investigation to be conducted, and on December 29th, Robert Muirhead, a Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, arrived to do just that. And here's where things truly took a turn for the eerie. Murr had found the lighthouse logbook that the men kept until their disappearance. That is, about dinner time of December 15th. On December 12th, Thomas Marshall wrote that there were severe winds the likes of which he'd never seen in 20 years. Also, the two other men began acting in a highly unusual way. Ducat, according to the logbook, was very quiet, and MacArthur was crying. Highly unusual in this instance was a huge understatement. All three of the keepers were tough, hardened men, and MacArthur was a veteran mariner. It was simply impossible that he could have been crying because of the storm, no matter how bad it was. The entry from December 13th told that the winds were still howling, and the sea was even more violent than the day before. The log implied that the three men were terrified, which was, again, very strange since they were experienced keepers and knew that they were safe inside the lighthouse. The elements could do nothing against a sturdy stone structure built specifically to withstand rough weather conditions like these. But perhaps the most unsettling of this was the fact that there were actually no storms cited on the 12th, 13th, or 14th of December in that area. It was written in the log that the skies finally cleared only on the morning of December 15th. And that was the last entry. The keepers went missing on the evening of the same day. There are so many inconsistencies in this whole story that it remains a mystery to this day. Not only did the official investigation not find any clear evidence of what had happened in the Eileen Moore Lighthouse, but it also made the situation even more perplexing. As soon as the news reached the mainland, wild theories from all corners of the UK started circulating. Still, there was also at least the official version of events, and that made some sense. You see, the western landing of the lighthouse premises was severely damaged by recent storms. Iron railings were bent, the iron railway beside the path was torn out of concrete, and turf had been ripped away from the top of a cliff that stood 200 feet tall. This evidence showed that the waves and the wind had been particularly savage. And there lay the explanation to the mysterious vanishing of the keepers. On the 15th of December, two of the men must have gone out into the storm to secure the box on the western landing which contained mooring ropes. They had been out for some time when the third one, left inside as the rules required, noticed an abnormally large wave coming down on the island fast. Deciding there was no time to waste, he leaped to his feet, overturning the chair he had been sitting on, and rushed off to warn the other two of the imminent danger. He was in a big hurry, so he didn't stop to grab the oilskin coat on the way out. But apparently, he was too late. When he reached his fellow keepers, the wave had already reached the island, and as they were all dangerously close to the edge, it swept them all from the landing. Seems a plausible enough theory, but there are a couple of gaps in it. Firstly, it doesn't explain where the storm even came from. The keepers disappeared in the evening of December 15th, and by all accounts, the weather that day was fine, and the sea was calm. Even the keeper's own logbook confirmed it. So, how would a huge wave appear on that day without any warning? And secondly, again according to the entries in the lighthouse logbook, the damage to the western landing had been done before the men's disappearance. So, they must have witnessed the mayhem, but had not in fact gone out into it. Since 1900, many more theories have been born, including one about a freak wave washing away one of the men and the others being swept away by subsequent waves while helping him. Also, some theorized that a big wave might have entered a narrow gully by the western landing and burst back with force, pushing the men who were trying to secure their equipment over the edge. In this theory, the third keeper was also running to help his colleagues but suffered the same fate as them. But whatever hypotheses were given, credible or nonsensical, none of them have given us any clue as to what really happened to the three bold men from Eileen Moore. Who knows? Maybe someday the truth will be discovered? What do you think? caused the lighthouse keepers to disappear from the island? Let me know down in the comments. If you learned something new today, then give this video a like and share it with a friend.
You know how Stephen Hawking said, the best evidence we have that time travel is not possible and never will be, is that we have not been invaded by hordes of tourists from the future. But what if these tourists come to our time, but they do it secretly? You may even have met one of them. Let's see the most famous time travelers. Meet Orin. He's a cyborg who came to us from the year 2050 to stop the coming end of the world. In 2020, he appeared on a TV show where he said the whole world was inside the Matrix. Then he hit the headlines and gave an interview to a popular YouTube channel. As proof that he's a cyborg, he demonstrated his robotic voice, which can be made in a simple computer program. He also called himself We because he declared himself a collective consciousness that had come to save humanity. Orin became famous for his predictions about the near future, but it turned out that many experts had already announced these forecasts earlier. He also said that a huge corporation was suppressing humanity, and we were inside a complex computer simulation. If we don't improve or care for each other and nature, the end will begin in 2050. Orin no longer appears on major shows, but he has a small fan base of people who love all sorts of fantastic theories. Another time traveler is Adam Archin, who came to us from 2045. There was an interview with him on YouTube where he shared some details about the future of the US, after which the video went viral and hit the lines in many newspapers. Archin reported that the last official president of the country would be the daughter of Martin Luther King III, and she would become the greatest US president in history. Another exciting event that Archin announced is supposed to happen in 2028. He said that people would learn about the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations. He added that these creatures wouldn't come from outer space. The traveler also noted that the world would switch to a single digital currency and all cash would disappear. Of course, no one believed him, so the experts conducted a lie detector test. And Adam Archin successfully passed it. He said that he had a chip in his hand to facilitate time travel. An extraterrestrial civilization would arrive on Earth in 2028, and in 2045, people would be closer to robots. The lie detector didn't state that Archin was lying, but this doesn't mean he told the truth, since the device can be deceived with the help of special training. In any case, in 2028, we will find out whether Archin was right or not. All these time travelers arrive in the past and, for some reason, don't use knowledge from the future. What would you do if you could go back 50 years? Perhaps you would invest money in shares of some young company that will become a big, expensive corporation. In that case, everyone would believe that you really came from the past. And by the way, one guy did it. He invested $800 in the stock exchange and made $350 million out of it. This guy's name was Andrew Carlson, and he hit a big jackpot in 2003. However, he didn't manage to enjoy a rich life because the FBI came for him. Andrew sold some stocks and bought others, and did this very successfully. Thus, in a few months, he became a millionaire. The Securities Commission couldn't believe in such coincidences, so it called the FBI. During the interrogation, everyone was sure Andrew would begin to justify himself and say he was lucky. But instead, he calmly replied that he came from the year 2256 with the help of a time machine. Of course, no one took it seriously. But when the FBI started looking for information about this man, they found nothing. Andrew Carlson had no documents. He was not in any database. He just appeared out of nowhere and started making a lot of money. He was interrogated for about 4 hours, and he behaved pretty calmly. It seemed as if he was telling the truth. However, he didn't tell them the time machine's location. When the press found out about this man, he immediately became a celebrity. Well-known news sites began to write about Andrew Carlson. Articles have appeared in Japan, Australia, Germany, the UK, and other countries. And of course, journalists started calling the FBI to find out more details about this guy. And the FBI told them that the whole story was fiction and that there was no Andrew Carlson. Information about him appeared on an internet resource known for its fake news. At some point, the article about the time traveler somehow got into Yahoo, where it went viral. So, as we see, all statements about time travelers are either fiction or a lie. Conversations about such travels appeared thanks to fantastic films and books. Pop culture has greatly influenced this fantastic concept and created several theories claiming that time travel is real. And some people believe that, especially those who are far from science. But what do real scientists think about this? Are such trips really possible? Let's try to find out. Scientists say yes, time travel is real because we're now traveling in time. Time is moving forward and we're moving with it. We call it a journey. But if we need to get into the future or go back to the past, everything is much more complicated here. Remember Einstein's little theory of relativity? It says that time moves relative to the observer and has no constant value. To understand better, here's a simple example. 10 hairs on your head. Is it a lot or a little? 10 hairs in a bowl of soup. Is that a lot or a little? Everything is relative and depends on the conditions. The same thing happens with time and space. If we move at a tremendous speed, close to the speed of light, then time slows down for us. The perception of time becomes different for a person who's running and for one who's standing still. If we're near some heavy object, let's say 1,000 times heavier than the sun, then the time next to this object also slows down, thanks to its strong gravity. In this sense, time travel is possible. If you're an old person and meet your friend as young as he was 50 years ago, "Why are you so young?" "Oh, I've been flying in space at a tremendous speed all this time, that's all." But this doesn't mean that this friend just sat on the ship for 50 years and didn't age. No, time was different for him. 10 years for you on Earth is a long period of time, but for him, these 10 years passed like half an hour. Gravity and speed bend time. For this reason, astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year and a half in orbit, became 5 milliseconds younger than his twin brother after coming to Earth. All this time Scott spent inside the ship flying in orbit at high speed, and he was also further away from the gravitational center of the planet. So, time was slower for him by 5 milliseconds than for his brother. Objectively, time always runs at the same speed, but its speed changes inside the perceptions of different observers under different conditions. That's what the theory of relativity is about. But what about jumping into the future or the past, like in movies? Wormholes will help you with this. This is something like tunnels that pass through space and time and can connect different time segments in different places in the universe. They are like cheat codes that can break the laws of the universe. Wormholes are elusive, have different sizes, are unpredictable, appear in space, and vanish.